If you've not read any Brandon Sanderson, you should give him a try. He's probably my favorite author, and I would say he's one of the best fantasy authors out there right now, writing some of the most creative worlds and stories that I've read. And with that out of the way, I'm here to give you a spoiler-free review that is not overhyped. In my opinion, Skyward is not Sanderson's best, but it's still pretty good, and I think it's a great entry point to his writing, especially if you like reading young adult. And before going into my thoughts, let me give you a quick look on what this book's about. In this book, remnants of humanity are trapped on a planet surrounded by a debris field and frequently attacked by a mysterious alien race known as Krell. The constant attacks forcing them to relocate into caverns beneath the planet's surface, with their only other defense being the pilots who fight off the Krell. We follow Spensa, a girl who has dreamed her whole life of becoming a starship pilot like her father. However, her father mysteriously deserted his team, leaving Spensa labeled as the daughter of a coward, making her chances of attending flight school uncertain. But Spensa remains adamant about attending flight school so she can redeem her family name and to find out the truth about what happened to her father. And her chances begin to look up when she finds an abandoned starship in a cavern. A ship with a lot of personality. It's kind of like a mix between Top Gun and How to Train Your Dragon, which is definitely what Sanderson was going for.
I'd been trying to figure out how to write Skyward for years. One of my favorite types of story is the archetype of the boy and his dragon. And slowly, the boy and his dragon turned into a girl in her spaceship.
Now let's start off by talking about the world building. This book does not take place in the Cosmere, which is Sanderson's universe that a lot of his books take place in. But it does take place in another universe from one of his short stories that you can actually read online. I will link that in the description down below. Keep in mind it's kind of a spoiler for Skyward. Overall, I would say the world building in this book is fairly light. The planet feels kind of small with just a few caverns and bases spread about. There is some mentions of Earth's history with Spensa's grand telling her stories of Beowulf and other brave warriors. In this world, because of the constant warfare, there's this cultural tradition of putting bravery at the forefront and shaming anybody who shows any sign of cowardice. And the way this is blended into the military, it kind of reminds me of the kamikaze, the special attack units deployed by the Japanese military, in the sense that these flight cadets are taught to value their ship over their own lives. It also kind of reminded me of the bridge crews in the Stormlight Archive. I wouldn't necessarily call the light world building a negative thing. This is just the first book, and I feel like it tells the story that it sets out to tell, and that's the story of Spensa and this flight crew. Which leads me to the characters. Now Spensa, since she's the daughter of a coward, she sort of overcompensates for this at the beginning with dramatic threats and over-the-top anger and just a lot of angst. And at first I did find this to be too cartoony and kind of annoying, but then I quickly grew to like her character as we saw her grow throughout the book, and she does get a good amount of progression in just this first book. As for the other characters, on the other hand, they were fun. There's Kimmelin, call sign Quirk, who has this like southern girl mannerism. I thought she was a fun character. There's also the old gruff flight instructor, Cobb, who was friends with Spensa's father. I liked all the members of the flight crew, but I just wish we got a little bit more attached to them. I felt like there were certain events that would have had a bigger impact if we did get more of these characters and we got to grow more emotionally attached to them. And there's two chapters specifically where I felt like the friendships in the flight crew began to grow a little bit stronger, and that's something I wanted to see more of. I'm excited for the second book.
I want to see their friendship grow.
And there's also Jorgen, also called Jerkface, and this is just a nitpick, just a personal preference, but just the repetition of the word jerkface I found kind of annoying. I felt like the joke kind of should have ended a little bit earlier. I mean, realistically, if a teenager is going to give you a rude nickname, I don't think it's going to be jerkface. And with scud being a preferred word in this book, I felt like they could have implemented that, like called him scud breath or something. I don't know. Though I guess Jorgen and jerkface kind of go better. And again, that is just 100% personal preference and me being picky. I did like how we got to see some of Spensa's living relatives and how she has a good relationship with her gran and her mother. A lot of books just tend to forget about the parents. But the star of the show goes to the non-human characters. There's only two of them, but they were by far my favorite. First of all, there's Doomslug, who is a slug. I don't really know what else to say. And then there's Mbot.
Hey, that's me!
Which is the AI that is Spensa's ship. I think for a lot of people, myself included, Mbot was my favorite character. He falls under a trope I really enjoy, and that's the classic comic relief AI sidekick, who's a little ignorant to human nature and why humans act the way they do. Now, the pacing of this book, I can only relate it to the starships themselves. I flew through this book, and I'd say the pacing is its biggest strength. The way that Sanderson writes the Poco battles, it really keeps your adrenaline going. I'm sure this has a large part to do with the fact that Sanderson contacted several real-life pilots to learn about maneuvers and the effects of G-force on the body. And you can expect the famous Sanderson avalanche as you see it pick up more excitement near the conclusion. Also, for those wondering, there isn't really a whole lot of romance going on. We know there's one building up, like it's quite obvious, and there's some things that are kind of predictable, but there isn't a whole lot of romance in this first book. I will say the story does have its predictable moments, but it also has some surprises in there as well. And the ending did successfully get me excited to read the sequel, Starsight. I believe that's coming out in December. Or maybe it's October. Overall, I found this book to be fun. It's actually the first YA book that I've read in a while that I've really enjoyed. I don't read a lot of young adult. I have read some great ones before. I've also just read a lot that feels very overhyped, and it feels like the same thing being recycled constantly. And if you are a big Sanderson fan, you love the Stormlight Archive, maybe you don't read young adult that much, I do feel like you should still give this book a try. It's a lot of fun. I just would not go into it expecting that same level of character progression and world building as in his other books. Obviously, I don't feel like this book is trying to be that, so just have the appropriate expectations when going into this one. And who knows, you might be surprised. I found it to be really enjoyable, and I would recommend it to any Sanderson fan. And if you've read Skyward, but you haven't read anything else by Brandon Sanderson, I would definitely check out some of his other books as well. I would recommend the Mistborn series or the Stormlight Archive. The Stormlight Archive, yes, the books are huge, but I would definitely say it's worth it. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book and what your thoughts were, and if you have a favorite Sanderson book. And hey, maybe check out my Etsy store if you're looking to buy a bookmark, because I designed them, and you can find the link to that in the description down below.